Alright, my good people, what the hell is going on? This is Unnecessary Rambling. I'm Brandon Sylvia. Thank you all for stopping by again here today. It's Spooktober. It's the spooky season. It's time to get festive. And I thought, what better way to do that than to dive in to a 9th generation horror tier list. So pretty much going through and ranking every PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series survival horror, or just, horror in general, game that I have played so far in this generation. So that does mean that we won't be talking about Resident Evil 2, RE3, The Last of Us, even though those games have PS5 versions. They came out initially in the, 8th generation of consoles. And for The Last of Us, the 7th generation, and also the 8th and the 9th, and probably the 10th, 11th, 12th.
2 hours later.
47th, 48th, 49th. They might stop at the 50th. And I can't even blame them. Great game. Make that money. Anybody willing to pay for it, keep selling that bad boy to them. Alright, so as you see here, we got the 20 or so horror titles to go through and rank. And we got to start it off with RE4, the remake, and you can kind of make the argument there why rank Resident Evil 4, the remake, and not The Last of Us remake. RE4 is more of a remake than The Last of Us remake. I think we can all kind of agree on that. And the 2005 game was one of the greatest games of all time. The remake, I think, is like the definitive way to play Resident Evil 4 now. It's just absolutely freaking excellent. The added backstory, the knife parries, still keeping intact the zany, weird, over-the-top combat with Leon, the Leon karate master karate kick, Kurt Angle, belly-to-belly suplex, and you got all the crazy action still in place with Resident Evil 4, and separate ways, just finished playing that. I'll talk more about that in a later video, but that's an excellent $10 complimentary little piece to throw right into the mix there. Great boss battles, switching the weapons on the fly, so many of those improvements, not having to worry so much about Ashley in RE4, the remake, opposed to the original. It's just cleaned up across the board, and I really do think it's the definitive way to play Resident Evil 4 now. One of the greatest games of all time, somehow made even better with this remake. I think this is undeniably S tier. Resident Evil 8 Village. This is a interesting one. I know people are kind of split on this. I really liked this game a lot. I prefer it over RE7. I think RE7's a little bit scarier, but once again, our Village is similar to RE4 in the tone and in the atmosphere. A lot of definitely borrowing from RE4 in a lot of ways. But I think the best thing about Village is just the damn first-person gunplay is fantastic, and the enemies that you're fighting in Village are so much more enjoyable, in my opinion, than the enemies you're fighting in RE7. You know, the Lycan, and you got the the werewolves, and then the bosses, like all the different zones where you're taking on Lady D and Heisenberg, and you have these different boss sections that are all fun and rewarding. And I don't know. I really enjoyed Village. I do understand people saying, well, it's really not that scary, but I will say the section, the little dollhouse section, I think that's one of the scariest moments of like true psychological horror in Resident Evil history. One of the only moments of psychological horror in Resident Evil history. Do I have it on the same tier as Resident Evil 4? Absolutely not. But I'd be hard pressed to give this anything lower than an A tier. So I'm going to go RE Village at the A tier. And as you see here, we got S through D, and then I added in 2 little tiers: didn't finish but enjoyed, and then didn't finish and didn't enjoy. So added in a couple little tiers to spice it up a bit. Let's change the color to make these look a bit more unique. All right, so we'll throw in a little blue and a little purple there to mix it up a bit. All right, next up we have House of Ashes, Dark Pictures Anthology's House of Ashes. And I like House of Ashes a lot. I like the setting. I like the basic kind of setup there of it being, it's taking place in Iraq after 9/11, and it's a war story essentially, but then you're kind of making some unsuspected alliances, taking on a supernatural threat. And I like that they were still able to keep somewhat of the camp alive, somewhat of the humor alive, and diving into like some of the romantic relationships and shit. And it still had some of, I think the characterization and more the more back and forth kind of relationships that where you feel like a fly on the wall, I think that is what Supermassive really excels at. And I thought that they were able to tackle that pretty well in House of Ashes, and not just like go full blown into like a war horror story. So I enjoyed it. I don't know. I don't think I would put it. I think I'd go like right around the C-ish tier. Actually, no, I would go B tier. I think I would go B tier for House of Ashes. Then we go to The Devil in Me, Supermassive's next release, and this one I am a little bit colder on. It got more involved. They tried to add like puzzle solving and more exploration, and even like some, I wouldn't say platforming, but just more. There were bigger spaces to move around, and you had like an inventory system. So it seemed like this was Supermassive's experimenting ground, where they were trying to come up with the next iteration of these games. And it definitely left a lot to be desired, and I think taking the focus away from the characters and not really diving into the story as much and giving you those like big decision-making moments that feel so satisfying in those games, I did think it hurt The Devil in Me. I wouldn't go D tier. I'll go C tier for it. Definitely below House of Ashes, but I don't think I would put it in the D tier. And now we get to The Quarry. This is hands down, the best Supermassive game since Until Dawn, in my opinion. This is excellent. Just a good old 80s slasher horror movie brought to life in video game form, or in Supermassive style video game form, narrative-based decision-making adventure game. And man, the characters in this game are excellent. They're like camp counselors, and once again, that fly on the wall feeling where it feels like these characters have already established their bonds and their relationships, and you just kind of get to take part in this crazy backwoods slasher with them. But you got all the camp, all the drama, all the romance, all that silly shit still going on, and there's just so much more meat on the bones with The Quarry. This is a much bigger game. This is in that Until Dawn camp, where I believe 2K was the publisher for The Quarry, and PlayStation was the publisher for Until Dawn. And you can tell, having that a little bit bigger budget to work with, they were able to make something quite a bit more substantial, quite a bit bigger. And I just think they benefit from having a longer runtime, getting to know the characters a bit more. And so I'll go B tier. I wouldn't put it in the same tier as Village, I don't think. I'll go B tier above House of Ashes, though. I don't know. I actually might go A tier. We'll see later. I think B tier above House of Ashes is fine for The Quarry. Dying Light 2. Techland with the best in the biz in terms of their first-person parkour traversal systems that they've created in the Dying Light world. I don't really think there is a better developer at making parkour-based gameplay right now. Not that a lot are trying, but I just think that their exploration and the moment-to-moment in Dying Light is absolutely excellent. The gore, the brutality, it's just a first-person melee hack and slash style experience with awesome parkour gameplay, getting like a little grapple gun midway through the game, and then that adding a whole new dynamic to how you get around the city. And not to mention, you're talking about this kind of being a huge breakout for them in terms of introducing more role-playing systems and trying to dive a bit more into that and giving you some agency in the narrative. Did that necessarily pan out all that well? Was it super deep, Larian level RPG systems and shit? Definitely not, but there were big moments where you could make big decisions, and it did feel like it impacted the narrative. So I enjoy the shit out of Dying Light 2. It had its issues. I ran into quite a few bugs, quite a few technical issues, and the story overall, I don't think it's like a masterpiece, but it's definitely in the B tier. I'll go above the Quarry and below Village on the A tier. Dead Space Remake. 2 incredible survival horror remakes coming in 1 year, and then Silent Hill 2 on the horizon. We got Alone in the Dark on the horizon. Fatal Frame's kind of percolating a little bit over there with some of their remasters or ports or whatever the hell you want to call them. But Dead Space the remake, it absolutely phenomenal game. The visuals alone are mind-blowing, breathtaking. On a pure moment-to-moment gameplay basis, it really doesn't get much better than Dead Space, man. It is so goddamn fun to play. The visuals are great. But, I don't think it's as much of an improvement compared to something like RE4 from 05 to 2023, Dead Space from 08 to 2023. Like, RE4 just felt like it needed more touch-ups. It felt like it had more to improve on. Whereas Dead Space, the original, they did clean up the zero gravity stuff a ton in the remake, but the original was just, it played really damn well and felt so much more modern. In 2008, it felt so much, it just feels, even going back to it, like I played Dead Space for the first time in 2020 or 2021, it felt comparable to the third-person shooters that we were getting then. So it didn't need the cleanup as much as RE4 did, but it's still an undeniably excellent game, and not as much went into the Dead Space remake in terms of introducing new systems and new mechanics and shit like that. But it's for sure A tier. I think I would go, I will go above Village, and that might come down to a perspective choice. I like third-person games more than first-person, but I just think the combat, the weapon diversity in Dead Space is so goddamn fun, and smashing on enemies' corpses, laying there and getting the loot from their body that pops up. It's just the video gamification of Dead Space. I think they do a great job of making every moment of that game really damn fun. Cutting enemies' limbs in half, like it's so damn fun to play. And then from Dead Space to Dead Space Diet, we have the Callisto Protocol, and the Callisto Protocol I had fun with. I did finish it, and I think that there's a lot to improve on for sure, but it's a bummer that you're seeing a lot of layoffs take place with striking distance, and I think even Glenn Schofield left recently, which is such a bummer to just know that we're probably not going to get another survival horror title from that team, and because I think there's a lot that can get cleaned up in the Callisto Protocol for a sequel or for just a new IP. The idea of leaning heavily into a melee horror game, a third-person melee horror game, is really interesting. The execution of it, I think, wasn't the strongest, kind of having that bob and weave system and really relying on that as if you're playing like Fight Night or some shit. I don't think that worked too well. I don't think that added anything to the experience, other than like a lot of frustration. It's a tough game. It's a really challenging game. It's a beautiful, beautiful game. The visuals on this thing are some of the best of the generation. I mean, it's right up there with Horizon Forbidden West, Cyberpunk, Forza Horizon. Like, it's one of the best looking games of the generation. There's just moments with this thing where, like, real high highs and real low lows. I'll go above The Devil in Me for sure, but I definitely wouldn't put it in the B tier. I'm going to go C tier above The Devil in Me. It's a game with a lot of rough edges, but a lot of beauty beneath the surface. There's a lot of things in there where, like the movie where the guy takes off the chick's glasses and she goes from like a 6 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10, the most ridiculous shit in the world. I think that kind of makeover could happen with the Callisto Protocol, where if we got a sequel to it and, took some lessons from the mistakes that were made with that game, I think we could get a really good number 2. But their debut wasn't the strongest. Dredge. This is one of my favorite games of the year, and This is one of the most unique games I've played in a long ass time. You are, you're a captain of this boat. You're going around and you're taking different quests from people and you're dredging up shit from the bottom of the sea. You're pulling out damn gold, you're pulling out damn wood, you're pulling out all sorts of shit. You're taking it back to either your upgrade shop, or you're taking it back to the fish merchant. You're going out and catching fish, taking it back to the fish merchant, getting money so you can upgrade your boat so that you can go and tackle some of the more difficult terrain out there. I don't know if terrain would be the right word, but you're going out and tackling the supernatural occurrences bubbling below the surface, and you have to take on some enemies that are, not your common man. I'll just say that. It's got a cool, HP Lovecraftian feel to it, and a lot of the monster design and shit like that, and it's just a really, really rewarding loop having that inventory and item management system similar to something like your Silent Hills or your Resident Evils, but in such a different gameplay experience. Great video game. Dredge I would put on I gotta be honest, I'd put it on the A tier. I think I would actually go above Village. All this is impromptu on the fly, so don't hold me to this. Don't hold my feet to the fire just yet. I'd have to think about this a little bit more, but right now I'm saying Dredge I think I would put above Village and maybe below Dead Space. Fuck, man. I don't know. We'll get to that, and when I do my end of the year rankings, we'll get to that. But in the moment right now, I think I would have Dredge above Dead Space. Not 100% sure. Don't hold me to it, like I said. But right now, in this moment, I think I would have Dredge above Dead Space. Layers of Fear. So, I like this game. I'm really growing more and more disinterested in the walking sim format, the survival horror first-person walking simulators. But every now and then, one will come out and it really does something unique, or at least it's just kind of interesting to me. And I never played the original, so this was unique to me. The constant perspective swapping, going from these one world to another, and kind of that psychological horror that was taking place in those moments where you really didn't know what to expect around each corner, or even in each room where you're walking straight forward and you pick something up, pick up a book, pick up a note, whatever you're reading, the dialogue, and then you turn around and you're in a totally different room even though you didn't exit any door or anything. Those moments were pretty damn impressive, especially on a technical level. I was constantly impressed with this game on a technical level. But in terms of where I would rank it, because I think the second half of the game really kind of blew. Like, that shit just sucked. A lot of it really, really sucked. There was one real cool puzzle, but I didn't really enjoy the second half of the game at all. And I think that would definitely drop it to the C tier. I'd probably put it below The Devil in Me. This would be the bottom of the C tier for me. All right, and then we get into Dead Island 2. We call this, we got Dying Light at Home. I don't know. Obviously, there's a lot of crossover there with Techland being the original developer for Dead Island, and then Dead Island 2 going through about 746 developers before it saw the light of day. But listen, the game, I'm so surprised that the game was as polished as it was. I think that was like my biggest takeaway after going through all of that turbulence to finally see it release and be as clean as it was. That's really impressive. And it's fun enough. It's gory as all hell. It's super, super visceral. The kills are super visceral, and some of the weapons are fun to mess around with, and, setting up different electrical traps, and you have this like electric grenade thing that you can throw into a pool, and you kind of lure all the zombies into a pool. You throw the electric grenade into it, and you see all them bitches get electrocuted. Like, that is silly and fun. The story is not all that interesting at all. It's pretty well presented though. I would go, I'll go C tier for Dead Island 2. I'll go above Layers of Fear. I'll go You know what? Actually, I think I would go the top of the C tier. I'd go above the Callisto Protocol and the Devil in Me as well, but I don't think I would put it in the B tier. Ghostwire Tokyo, once again, very much in the action horror camp. You could make an argument that this isn't horror as well, but don't be that guy. Ghostwire Tokyo is obviously from the Evil Within team, Tango, the now Xbox owned team, and then this was a PlayStation exclusive for a little bit with the weird contract that was in place with Bethesda and PlayStation for Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo before they were acquired by Microsoft. But Ghostwire Tokyo, I really, really enjoyed the story. It was much more emotional and hard-hitting than I really expected it to be. But the gameplay I thought was kind of generic. I think if you're going to get into like a magic-based first-person shooter, spell-based first-person shooter, I would recommend Immortals of Avium over Ghostwire Tokyo. I just think the gameplay is much more consistent, much more... It feels much more like a solid first-person shooter, but introducing magic into the fold. Ghostwire Tokyo kind of feels like a slightly wonky first-person shooter with magic. But it is cool to see you weaving the spells, looking like Doctor Strange out there. Ghostwire Tokyo, for the story alone, I think I would put it... I would go C tier. I wouldn't put it on that B tier camp. I would go above the Callisto Protocol, I think, though. Actually, I don't know. I think I would go Callisto over Ghostwire because I like Callisto's gameplay better for sure, and I like both of the stories a lot. So I think I would go Callisto over Ghostwire. And the presentation in Callisto blows Ghostwire out of the water. My bad, guys. I had to fix my damn camera there. I didn't notice I was taking up half of the C tier. But next up, we have the first game on the list that I did not finish, and that is Tormented Souls. And I didn't finish it because I hated the map. I really did not like the map. I played like the first 2 or 3 hours, and I did not want to keep going with that map. Listen, I love these games. A part of me debates if I still love them as much as I used to. I grew up with this PlayStation 1, static, classic, tank-based survival horror. That was my shit back in the day. And then, I think I've just kind of gotten used to these third-person, fully 3D, fully movable characters with just, it seems like so much more flexibility on turning on a dime, blasting an enemy in the head, and like, I don't know. I can appreciate things about both, but I feel the older I'm getting, the more I am just kind of getting used to the way that games are made now. And so when I go back to these games, I don't have as much enjoyment with them as I used to. And I'll go didn't finish, but I should have put another tier up here. Didn't finish, but appreciate. Like, I'm glad these games are coming back. I think that people who grew up on the SNES and the NES, they, for the longest time, like in the PlayStation 4 generation, especially the 8th generation, you were constantly seeing SNES, NES-inspired titles being released, like brand new titles being released on modern hardware. And you really don't see a lot of that, or you didn't see a lot of that for, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, people who were nostalgic for that era. And you're starting to see more of that pop up, like, once again, Signalis here. Another old school, very PlayStation 1 inspired with its, with its visuals, with its tank-based control schematics, with the extremely difficult puzzle solving and all that shit. And Signalis I played through about 75% of it, and then I ended up just getting stuck on a puzzle and didn't go back to it. But Signalis is a weird game too, because I don't even know if I should necessarily include it on this list, because even though it released during this generation, it's a game that only has like a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One version of it, I believe. And it released last year, if I'm not mistaken, so well into the 9th generation, but just didn't put out a 9th gen version of the game, which it doesn't really matter because it's not like a graphically intensive, performance reliant game or anything like that. But it is, I would definitely put Signalis above Tormented Souls in the didn't finish but enjoyed category. I would highly, highly recommend that. This creepy ass story, sci-fi horror. The map is excellent. The movement is excellent. The shooting works so well. It almost kind of has like a twin sticky feel to it. It's man, Signalis is a great video game. I definitely need to go back and finish it. Killer Frequency. This is a standout title from this year, one that I did not expect at all to enjoy nearly as much as I did. You're playing as essentially like a disc jockey in the 80s or whatever, maybe even 70s. But you are, spinning records. You're taking calls on the air. You used to be like a big shot DJ in the big city. Now you moved to a small town, and it ends up being where the 911 hotline gets rerouted to your news station or to your broadcast station. And you are tasked with keeping the civilians, keeping the townspeople up to date with where the serial killer may be lurking, because all the 911 calls are coming to you, and most of these people who are calling are talking about, I think I'm being followed, and you're like, okay, well, where are you being followed? So you put it on the map. People kind of have an idea of where the serial killer is, so they can be on the lookout. And then you're solving puzzles for these people, making sure that they can get to safety, and people can live and die. And it's just a constant, like, there's no start over screens or anything like that. So it's like a game that's very much about just trying to stay composed and trying to piece the puzzle together to get people to safety and to figure out who the serial killer is and bring them to justice. And it's a really, really fun game with a unique twist. My only big complaint with it is I wish that you could see a little bit more of the story actually take place in the game. There's really no cutscenes or anything to like see the big moments happening, but I would for sure put this on the B tier. I would go above House of Ashes. I'd probably go below the Quarry. All right, next up we have Absoloth End of Gods, and I really like the kind of the setup for this game. It's like this Norse mythology meets sci-fi sort of plot that they're trying to dive into here. And I think the setting, the atmosphere, the narrative is all interesting. You're like this test subject at the beginning of the game. You wake up and you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. This game has a real strong startup, a real strong hook to it. Unfortunately, gameplay is not this video game's strength at all. It's very light in the gameplay department. It is a first-person walking sim. It has a little bit of combat, very, very light abilities that you get, like probably 2 or so hours into the game. I only played about 3-4 hours of it. I ended up putting it down. I don't think I had much more to go on it. I was just kind of getting bored with it. Didn't really feel any reason to continue playing it. The puzzle solving and all that shit, it's just not all that interesting in my opinion. The moment-to-moment gameplay is just not that fun, but the world building and the story and the atmosphere I thought was really solid, and it's an interesting game. So I would put this in the didn't finish but enjoyed category, probably above Tormented Souls, but definitely below Signalis. Alright, next up we have Oxide Room 104. This is one of my little hidden gems, definitely one of my survival horror hidden gems from this generation so far. It is a sadistic, body horror heavy title. You wake up in this motel room, you're in a bathtub, you're being operated on by some sick scientist like motherfucker, and you're trying to escape the motel. I think the motel setting is really cool, and it's really, I love how interconnected it is and how easy it is to just get around. You know exactly where you need to go. It's so obvious and in the open. It's not a bunch of mindless backtracking and shit. And it's cool because it kind of plays out like a choose your own adventure, except more with like in-game decision making, like which item should I use to be able to get out of this encounter? I'm being chased. What item should I use to distract the enemy, or whatever the case may be. It's a really cool, unique game. It's definitely an indie game. It doesn't have like some deep story or anything like that, but I think the gameplay's fun. The setting is really cool, and yeah, I'd go C tier. I'd go above Layers of Fear maybe below the Devil in Me. Yeah, above Layers of Fear, below the Devil in Me for Oxide Room 104. And next up we have The Medium. Definitely one of the more disappointing games of this generation for me. When I bought my Series X, this was like, I think this might have been the first game that I played on my Series X. You know, Bloober promising that this is going to be some next gen just showpiece, and from a technical level with their little dual world feature that they were trying to pull off. And listen, I'm sure that is difficult to develop. I'm sure that is difficult to pull off, but you know, from a technical level, but from a player's perspective, when we're playing The Medium, I don't think it reads nearly as impressive as they were expecting or hoping that feature to read. Once again, this is one that I did not finish. I probably put 4 or 5 hours into it, and I was just like, yeah, I don't dig it. So I'm gonna go didn't finish, didn't enjoy. Maybe one day I'll go back to it. I think that Bloober, like they did with Layers of Fear and Observer, and you know, I think they make incredibly atmospheric, interesting worlds, but they just do not excel at gameplay, and there's next to no gameplay in The Medium. There's very, very light puzzle solving, but it's mostly just walking around creepy atmospheres, which they, once again, they excel at that, but that's just not enough to really hook me anymore, especially you once again kind of taking into the equation the anticipation, where this is being marketed so heavily as like this real next-gen showpiece, and I didn't think it was that impressive at all. And next up, another walking sim, first-person horror walking sim in Sound Mind. I didn't finish this, also didn't really enjoy it. I saw a trailer for it, and there was a gun in the trailer, so I was like, okay, cool, maybe there's a little bit more action, a little bit more combat or something to freshen it up a bit. I played about 2 hours of it and was like, I think I'm good. I do like they have one mechanic where you like rip off you break this mirror and you get a glass shard and you hold the glass shard up behind you and you can see the enemy chasing you. I think that's a really inventive and unique mechanic, and that'd be something cool to see in more survival horror titles, just to kind of make you be in control or under duress while also trying to identify where the enemy is coming from, but not just like being able to look directly at them because you're having to run. Like, I think that's a really cool, interesting mechanic, but I would like to see it in a game that's a little bit more involved. Next up, we got Somerville, and this was from Dino Patty, the dude from Playdead, who, you know, was a lead developer on Inside and Limbo, and Somerville is taking inspiration from that. You know, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is going to be great, you know, another Inside Limbo style title, but unfortunately, I did not like this game at all. I did finish it, so I'll give it its credit there, but I still, it's a D tier game for me. They open up the world a lot more. They give you a lot more room to kind of explore, but I think that hurts the kind of concise, focused approach that you would get to games like Limbo and Inside. Somerville, it just, I thought the story was kind of cool, and I don't even know if you would necessarily consider this horror, but I thought that the alien invasion angle was cool, and there are like legitimately creepy moments in the narrative. But I ran into so many goddamn bugs, so many issues with this game, just little technical issues that were popping up one after another. And, you know, I played it day one on Game Pass, so I guess shame on me for playing the game on day one. I'm sure it's probably cleaned up a bit by now, but did not dig this whatsoever. Sorry to close off on such a Debbie Downer note there, but that is my PS5, Xbox Series X 9th generation survival horror tier list. I hope you enjoyed, and hit me in the comments if there's any survival horror titles that you highly recommend for the PS5, for the Xbox Series X that I don't have on this list. Hit me in the comments, because I probably haven't played them. They probably flew over my radar, under my radar, I think is the term. Over the head, under the radar, that's the term. But yeah, recommend them in the comments below, because especially if there's a physical copy of it. Because if there's something solid that has a physical release, I will grab a copy of that bad boy. So hit me in the comments below with any of your recommendations that are not on this list, and stay tuned for the next video. Subscribe if you're new, hit the like button if you would like to, and share it with a friend, do all that good shit if you would like to. I will see you good people in the next episode.
Hold up. Hey.